share my Bernina stitch regulator story. Many of you know that my husband and I run a Bernina retail sewing store here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We do also sell Husqvarna Viking, Pfaff, and Singer sewing machines. But back in 2004, this is how I remember the story going. And it was a Saturday, and back in the day, on Saturday on PBS, there was a Fons and Porter had a morning quilt show that a lot of people tuned into because, you know, before YouTube, right? And before podcasts and such. And, you know, the internet was around, but not as strong as it is today. And I remember in the morning, and Saturdays were always a busy day in the store. And I remember the phone rang and somebody asked, I want that machine with that regulator. And like, they didn't even remember what it was called. And we're like, what machine? Now, so many times these days, when a new machine is introduced, especially by Bernina, it is done at a dealer convention. If you've ever heard the term Bernina University, or BU, as we always called it, is that's where new product is introduced and it's launched and it's kept under secret. And then all of a sudden there's a big launch day. And that's how things are these days, is that it is a big announcement. Usually the stores get to see it and they're sharing it on social media and everything. But this is a long time ago. So what had happened was, we quickly learned after the phone was ringing off the hook. I mean, it just did everything. And we didn't even know what this machine was. We realized that Fons and Porter had released an episode where they had filmed an episode with this machine and the stitch regulator, and they had released it before they had alerted the Bernina dealers that there was a new machine, which happened to be the Bernina 440 with the Bernina stitch regulator. Like, it was included with the package. And so we quickly got notified, yes, this machine is available, and here, you can order it. So we ordered it, we get it in, and I was very excited about this because free motion quilting, as you have heard, hasn't always been the easiest for me. So as that machine came in, we quickly sat down, I put that foot on, and it was instant love for me. And it was like it made a difference in my free motion quilting, and I knew it had potential. And yes, we started selling those machines like hotcakes. But what happened next was a couple things. Well, first off, our competitors, not locally, but just on the general side, started to say bad things about the stitch regulator. Well, number one, because it worked from day one. But there was people that didn't know how to use it correctly, and and so it quickly got like a bad rap, like this stitch regulator doesn't work, it doesn't do anything. Well, on that particular model, when you put the stitch regulator on and plugged it in, because it was like underneath at that time, you had to actually touch a button on the front of the machine that said BSR, Bernina stitch regulator. You had to touch it to engage it. And if you never touched that button, it didn't really work at all. It was just like a free motion quilting foot that just kind of ran on its own. It was very scary, like if you weren't expecting it and people were like, oh my gosh, I don't know why this is doing it. This is not anything fun. It wasn't great. And then the other rumor that kind of got started was that it didn't work on red fabric. And I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't work on red fabric? So then I got red fabric out and I put red fabric underneath. And I think what they were thinking is like the red optical eye on red fabric couldn't see the red fabric. And I'm like, it worked just fine. And it did. And I also remember one more thing about this whole like amazing new thing is when I would take this off to then switch back to a normal foot and to show a customer like, let's sew on it, let's do this, is I literally would take this and I was worried people would just like pick it up or steal it or like misplace it. So I was actually taking this foot, and it's still the same exact foot that it was back in 2004, and I would stick it in my pocket. And so there was many times that I'm moving around all day, I'm walking, I'm sitting, I'm up and down, and I have had this in my pocket squished for many an hours, and I'd pull it back out and stick it on the machine before I went home. One thing I realized is how sturdy this foot has been since the very beginning. I mean, it's worked from day one if you know how to work it correctly. And I think that's probably what scares people the most, or why they don't really get it when they sit down and use it, because they didn't really know the understanding of how it's supposed to work, which is one reason why we made this course, is so to really help you perfect the use of it and get the most out of it. So, but again, it is sturdy, it works. You, as you go in, I think the other thing we sometimes ran into was like people weren't plugging it in all the way. So like the only other thing, it's kind of like a headphone jack. Like for here, I can kind of just go back here and just plug it right back in. Almost, there you go. But you need to push it in and then click it, make sure it goes all the way in. And I think that was sometimes too, like people weren't getting it all the way engaged. Back in the day, on the older machines, it's underneath here. So you have to go up and then like push, like, so it comes up, it says like, hey, I can see the stitch regulator, and it starts to blink a little BSR on the screen. Back in the day, like here on this machine, it just like goes right to the stitch regulator screen once that's plugged in, so it knows. And the only way you can get to that screen is to actually plug it in. So like I said, back in the day, it was like this little, like you had to engage it, so it saw it, but you had to tell it, hey, let's turn on. And I think after that, that was probably the biggest thing. But again, people didn't really utilize it to its fullest. So just a reminder, if you haven't plugged in your stitch regulator in a while, or you haven't had your Bernina serviced in a while, one of the things to do is just make sure that your machine has the most current update available for that particular model. On the older machines, you might even send your stitch regulator in, and I say older like the original ones, the Bernina 440s or 430s. Remember, they're the Bernina Aurora 440, 430s. Send in your stitch regulator with your machine and have it updated. And if you're unfamiliar or have never done that, just ask your service department. They should know how to do that, no problem. The newer machines, when they are updated, they do not have to have that foot attached. It's just as soon as it attaches, it like updates itself. So the newer circuit boards are a little bit easier to do. But just trust me, if you haven't had your machine serviced before you start jumping into this course, that you actually take the time, have it professionally cleaned, and be updated, and it will purr as we start free motion quilting together with the Bernina stitch regulator.